and welcome back to the channel. My name is Katie and I know you saw the title of today's video. We are doing a really deep dive, big update to Amber being on the run. If you haven't seen my other videos, make sure and go check those out. I'll have links in the cards where, guys, apparently Amber has fled the country and many people are saying the information that's coming out is she's actually renouncing her U.S. citizenship so she doesn't get extradited, and what that is. What is happening? I swear, this story just gets crazier and crazier, but it's entertaining. I'm living for any moment, every moment of it. I'm sure you guys are too. And I just want to give you guys all of this information. So is she trying to avoid being extradited, and she is on the run for a few different things, guys. And guys, if you like content like this and you're new here, hi, how are you? I'm Katie. I just cover all the trending topics and I giggle at all these silly things and we just get as much information as we can. So if you like stuff like this, make sure and subscribe, hit that notification bell. Would absolutely love to have you around. So let's dive in. We know that Amber just recently, she lost the case. She is appealing it, but that's gonna take some time to figure out what's going on there. And she just sold her Yucca Valley home. She bought it for $570,000, sold it for $1.1 million, did get a profit. Now that money though goes into a trust, which a lot of people think has to do with Daddy Musk, which we will get into more. Now, one of her best friends, as we know, is Eve Bartlow, who is a Jewish journalist who was at the trial. Apparently they are kind of dating-ish. Nobody really knows what's going on there, but that's the rumors, that they kind of are together. Maybe they're not. And she is from Israel. She is Jewish. So as a result of all of that, Eve and her are in Israel. Now, why is this significant? Well, first of all, she just immediately sold her home and then took off. Now, with that being said, here's what we know so far. She has been wandering around Tel Aviv. She has been in a red maxi dress and the media has just been fawning over her. Oh, she's changing hearts and she's so beautiful that everybody just can't stand how pretty she is. And they're just losing it on the streets and yelling in her face about how pretty she is. The media is really trying to spin this romantic story of her in Tel Aviv. And while she's a pretty girl, nobody really thinks that. As well, paparazzi photos have shown her pushing a stroller that's empty, which has had many people still wondering if she actually did have a baby, because the rumor is that baby is Musk's, because she actually fought Musk in court over embryos. And we know Elon wants to have as many babies as possible, kind of ish. I don't know, he's a little bit weird, but you know what? If you make that kind of money and you can take care of him, I guess do you. Just don't be irresponsible, even though some people could say that's irresponsible. Not my place necessarily to say. I mean, I don't want to go have that many children, but that's just me and this little body that barely works. But with that being said, and also there was a really funny photo of Eve cutting up Amber's food for her, is what it looks like, and then being in a restaurant. So people have really romanticized this. However, a lot of people are saying, now here's what we know. Australia is right on her heels. We just got a letter from Australia that says they collected witness statements and they are ready to go after her for perjury as well. There could be possible IRS tax fraud. Reason being, Amber Heard, as we know, she said she donated that $7 million she got from Johnny to children's charities, and we found out that wasn't true, and then she said it went to legal fees. So people are saying audit her taxes. If she did this as a donation tax write-off, she can be not just fined, but possibly face some prison time. On top of all of that, we also have the stories of her crazy cuddle parties with Elon Musk, and that people were there that were not of age and shouldn't be there, and so were pharmaceuticals. So with all the information coming out, she would have reasons to be on the run. She has reasons to be concerned, guys. It's not like this is baseless. Now, the reason people are talking about Israel being on the run are a few things. First of all, she says she has no money. How is she paying for these expensive trips? Daddy Musk, anybody? Or is there somebody else? However, one thing about Israel is that Israel, when you are a national there or a citizen, the extradition process is very difficult. In fact, and I've been calling some of this lately, when it comes to Israel, guys, many criminals will get dual citizenship either ahead of time or during an issue that they may be having so they can avoid extradition. It's very, very known for this, which begs the question, is she really only around Bartlow? Well, here's the thing. We know she uses people, right? So obviously she was going to use Bartlow as much as she can, and she already has in certain ways. But does she continue that situationship that looks like it may not be going anywhere? And then we have Eve, who will go on social media and write all these emo things about feeling so alone and heartbroken and things. So we see all of that playing out and going on. Is Amber only in this situation with Eve to use her to be able to get dual citizenship? So we're gonna go into all of that. Let's jump on my computer. I'm gonna show you what I found. So let's go ahead and let's go into this first. It says extradition from Israel. And guys, this is directly from the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs. And it says abstract. The extradition process usually begins with a telegraphed request from a foreign police force for the preliminary, what is going on with me? Preliminary arrest of a fugitive person charged with or convicted of a felony. A person arrested must be brought before a magistrate court within 48 hours. The formal request for extradition is submitted by the embassy of the requesting country to Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. If the Minister of Justice believes that a proper case exists, a district court hears the petition. The court must be satisfied that all the conditions of the extradition law have been met and that there is sufficient admissible evidence to justify bringing the wanted person to trial had the person committed the charged acts in Israel. The Minister of Justice must then decide whether to grant the extradition request. Extradition is granted only if the requesting nation and Israel have an agreement providing reciprocity in extradition. An Israeli national may not be extradited except for an offense committed prior to becoming a national. Extradition can be granted only if the person has been charged or convicted of a felony or some other specific extradition offense. The offense must be a criminal offense under the laws of the requesting state and the extradition offense under Israeli law. Every request must be accompanied by evidence showing a prima facie, not sure if I'm saying that right, case against the offender. And guys, I want to give you a little more insight into what this looks like. This is called The Good Life of Criminals Who Flee to Israel. And it says, amid cumbersome extradition procedures, Jewish suspects from France and the former Soviet Union find sanctuary via the law of return. And I'm not going to go over all this, but I do want to go over a little bit to give you some info. And it says, Eddie Abitan, who moved to Israel from France 16 years ago, feels comfortable in his new-ish home. So comfortable, in fact, that when his wife competed in and won the reality show MasterChef Israel, he showed up with their children, mugged for the cameras, and ran to hug her and the judges when she was declared the winner. But the next day, Channel 13 News reported that Abitan had been convicted in absentia in France, sentenced to 6 years in prison and fined 1 million euros in a high-profile fraud case. At issue was the purchase of carbon dioxide emission quotas based on the Kyoto Protocol, while skirting 1.6 billion euros in a value-added tax. Abitan is said to have built financial networks and tax havens around the world to hide money from French authorities. Abitan thus doesn't dare visit his birth country, but no extradition request has been filed yet because he has appealed his conviction. It says, my client is marginal to this case, says his lawyer Yaron Lundgren, a former head of Israel's Police International Crimes Desk. It's true he got 6 years, but believe this was a mistake, he believes. He was at the wrong place the wrong time. There is no reason he can't appear on MasterChef. The media portrayed this as if he ran away, and that's nonsense. Over the past few years, French investigators have been here to investigate, and I've accompanied them. Extradition, if it comes up, won't be a simple matter. In the past, France was in no hurry to extradite French criminals who committed crimes in Israel and escaped to France. If France asks for his extradition, it's clear this will be fought over. And it says, Abitan isn't alone. Hundreds of Jews have taken advantage of Israel's law of return in the hopes they would not be extradited. Israel's law of return, or it says, but in the last 2 decades, based on legislation from the late 90s, Israel has ramped up its number of extraditions. A high-profile case at the moment is of former school principal Malka Leifer, who had been in Israel for 11 years and in detention since February 2018 after fleeing Australia. Amid charges, she R-worded 3 of her students, all sisters. A court is once again considering whether Leifer should be extradited. Her lawyers argue that she is mentally unfit to stand trial. Sometimes a conviction abroad haunts people like Abitan. He's in the real estate business in Israel, but after his conviction in France, Bank Mizrahi Tahafut, I hope I said that right, refused to provide loans to high-rise projects he took part in. In many cases, it's possible to keep doing business once you've arrived in Israel. Gregory Lerner, for example, came to Israel in the early 90s amid corruption charges in the former Soviet Union and was later accused of defrauding Israeli investors. He was also suspected of trying to bribe Israeli politicians in order to set up a bank. In 2006, Lerner was extradited to Israel by Paraguay and was convicted of defrauding investors. And Alex Kahn, one of the people convicted in the French case, spent 15 months behind bars in France and later moved to Israel. He has been sentenced to 6 years in prison in France and is now appealing. According to his lawyer, Mordecai Katz, he arrived in Israel with a valid Israeli passport. The problem isn't with people facing extradition, says attorney Gal Levertov, a former head of the National Department at the State Prosecutor's Office and the author of the Hebrew language book Criminals Without Borders. These people are treated according to law, and if there is enough evidence against them and all the conditions for extradition are met with no mitigating circumstances protecting them, they're extradited. The problem is with criminals who come to Israel and turn into their base of operations with no extradition requests in their case. Some try to launder their operations and might link up with local politicians. This becomes a strategic problem. A French man who lived in Israel until recently in Gilbert Chickley, I hope I'm saying that right, who convinced French bankers to transfer money to his account and later fled to Israel. He was extradited and was behind bars for 2 years in France, but due to technical problems regarding his extension of his detention, he returned to Israel. He has given media interviews about his operations and in 2017 went to Ukraine from where he was extradited to France. In February 2018, interview with Channel 10 News, Israeli ambassador in Paris estimated that France has more than 10 extradition requests outstanding with Israel, with more expected in the coming years. There are many wanted men in Israel, says Alain Avshalom, a former superintendent of the French desk at the Police International Department. There are French people in Netanya, I hope I'm saying that right, who haven't returned to France for 7 or 8 years, even when their parents left the planet out of fear they'd be arrested. He said that during one arrest he made, the suspect told him, "I'm a Jew. I bring money to this country. Why are you arresting me?" Avshalom says he responded, "The money you brought is illegal. You stole it from authorities abroad." The detainee answered, "What does it matter what I did? I bring in money. I'm Jewish." Avshalom says that his view is fairly common. These people were in shock that they were helping the French authorities locate and interrogate them, he says. In their mind, Jews don't do such things to other Jews. In the Abatin case, there are at least 4 other convicted people living in Israel, including Harom Cohen, Fabrice Sekoum, and a bunch of other names. I'm just not going to go into them all. Another convicted person, Michael Keslassi, lived in Israel for 3 years, but in 2016 he visited France under a false name and was arrested and jailed. So I'm going to give you a little overview of some people and what happens with Israel. Israel does seem in several ways, especially if you become a national or a citizen, to protect those from extradition. Now, last thing I want to bring up, the law of return. We saw this earlier, so let's look at this. It says, the law of return is an Israeli law passed on July 5th, 1950, which gives Jews, people with 1 or more Jewish grandparents and their spouses, the right to relocate to Israel and acquire Israeli citizenship. Section 1 of the law of return declares that every Jew has the right to come to this country as an Ola, or immigrant. In the law of return, the state of Israel gave effect to the Zionist movement's credo, which called for the establishment of Israel as a Jewish state. In 1970, the right of entry and settlement was extended to people with at least 1 Jewish grandparent and a person who was married to a Jew, whether or not they're considered Jewish under Orthodox interpretation of Jewish law. On the day of the arrival in Israel, or occasionally at a later date, a person who enters Israel under the law of return as an Ola would receive a certificate confirming their Ola, I hope I'm saying that right, their Ola status. The person then has 3 months to decide whether they wish to become a citizen and can renounce citizenship during this time. The right to an Ola certificate may be denied if the person is engaged in anti-Jewish activity, is a hazard to the public health or security of the state, or has criminal past that may endanger the public welfare. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit further. So, as I said, the rumor is she's going to be renouncing her citizenship so she can be in Israel. Now, here's a few questions. I would be very interested to see what or if this happens. Is it possible she gets married to Eve Bartlow? And that's part of, maybe she's using her. I'm not saying she is, we don't know. But is it possible she gets married to Eve Bartlow and then she gets that law of return status, the Ola? Is it possible that that happens and that's what she is attempting to do? And like I said, guys, I'm not saying that's happened. It's not for me to say at this point, but I do think these are some interesting concepts, and I do think it's interesting that after selling her home so quickly, boom, she is in Israel with Bartlow. I don't know, do you think I'm taking it too far? I want to know what you guys think. Sound off in the comments and tell me. As well, guys, if you like content like this, make sure and subscribe. Click the plus sign. Would love to have your giggles and have some fun every day. And otherwise, I think I'm going to get out of here. All right, guys, take care. Lots of love, lots of blessings. Till the next video, I'm giving everybody hugs, kisses, stay safe, and as always, your girl. We'll see you soon. Bye, guys.